Hi, welcome. So in the last video, we looked at strings and then we also talked about how you're going to learn most of these basic data structures in Python as we go along. So in this video, we are now moving on to numbers in Python, and numbers in Python are of two subcategories, integers and floats. So let's just go straight to the video and see how numbers in Python are created and all the things you can do with numbers in Python. So I created this notebook. You can just go back and install Jupyter Notebook so that you're here with me, same page. So we are going to look at numbers, just a comment here. So remember this markdown. And then I just wrote this two variables here. So the first one is integer 1. I just gave it any number 478. It can be any number, but it should not have a decimal at the end. It should not have a decimal at the end, because when it has a decimal, it's a float. It's a float. So the float here can be any number, but there must be a decimal at the end to make it to be a float. So just copy this, write this down, pause the video, write this down, and then let's continue. So if I want to check, I can check print integer 1 to see what is inside. So if I run it with my shift enter, let me just press shift enter here, I get that. And I can also print the type. So let me close this. I can also print the type. So we check the type, shift enter, it says it's an integer. I can also print the type of this one and just copy it and paste it here and run it. Then now I have the float, which is there. So you can see that a float is made up of just this decimal here. The fact that you have a decimal is a float, and the fact that you have no decimal is an integer. So now let's see some things. We looked at mathematical operations. So you would know that this would be the kind of things we'll do with integers and floats. Maybe how to add an integer, to divide, to multiply. So let's just say, let's create some variables. Integer 1. Let's just say this is 70, and then integer 2, let's just give it like 30. So if we initiate these two integers, you know that we can always add. So remember our addition. So it would be like you can say integer 1 plus integer 2. So if you do your print integer 1 then plus integer 2, so you get 100. So that is your addition. Then you can also do your subtraction, which would be integer 1, just change this to minus integer 2, and then when you do shift enter, you get 40. So which is 70 minus 30. So like we saw with the arithmetic calculations, it's just one big calculator. So you can also do the division. So if we do the normal division, remember, as we saw in an earlier video, you get a float. You get a float of the point. So even if this was maybe 50, 100 divided by 50, when we know this is supposed to be 2. So if we initialize this, shift enter, then we do this again, you see we still get a 2.0. So the answer must be a float because of that division. But else, if you change this to the floor division, remember, let's just do it under here. So if we do the floor division here, where is the double division here, then we run it, that is when we get back an integer. So just remember this about Python. We saw it in an earlier video, but this is the slight difference between maybe Python and other programming languages. So there is this floor division, and then there is a simple division. Now the next thing is powers. So we can decide to say, let's just say print, and remember the powers in Python is different. So what we are saying here is 10 raised to the power 2 here. So this is actually to the power 2 here. Then also what we saw in the arithmetic, when we're doing the arithmetic operations in an earlier video, there's also the modular. So you can want to get maybe like this mode this. So let's just get back these two integers here and then make it to be maybe 7, for example, and then 5, for example. So when you do 7 divided by 5, you know we expect to get a remainder of 2. So that is what we are going to do here. So we are going to say print now integer 1, then we do the modular sign, so which is the percentage sign. So we saw it in an earlier video. Now we are using it with the Python numbers. So that when we run that, we get 2 as a remainder. So if this was maybe 8, we do shift enter to initialize it, then we run it, we get 3 as a remainder. So that is something you know. So now let us try to see, can we concatenate numbers like we did with the strings when we in the last video. So you can always go back and check. So let's try and see. Now I'll bring in this integer. Let me just bring in this integer here, or this one, anyone, but remember the last thing that is initialized is what will be stored. So Python remembers integer 1 as 100 now. So I can decide to say maybe print and remember in the last video we looked at f strings, but let's just do it simply. Print my favorite number, for example, number is, let's just do it, skip a space because I know the next one will come without a space. So plus now my integer underscore integer. So let me just put this integer 1 here, integer 1 here. So let's run this. So we get an error which says this is a type error. It can only concatenate strings, not integers to strings. So you can't just take this 100 and join to this one. So how you need to do it is to cast. So casting is you convert it to a string first. So the str function, when you use it, this 100 now will be seen as a string. So it will be in the eyes of Python. Let me just add a new cell here. The 100 will be a string like this. So you can be able now to say my favorite number is this thing here with this casting. So you can change from one form to another. You can change from an integer to a string using str. Same as we'll see here, how you can change from we'll see below, where you can change from an integer to a float using the float function, and you can change from a float to an integer using the int function. So lots of interesting things to learn. Just make sure you watch the video, practice along. So here we have no error. My favorite number is 100 because we have been able to cast the different types here. So that is just a simple thing you can do. So even if you wanted to cast something, you could say, for example, this, let's get these two integers here, this integer and the float. So these are them again. So you could decide to say this integer should be changed to a float. So you would need to get a float command, a float function, and pass now your integer in it. So integer 1 here, for example. So it's now 478.0. Same as you could do the reverse here. Instead, get an integer function, which is the int. Then you change now the float to an integer. So let's see what it's going to give. So this is casting, and you can call it coercing or casting. So it's now taken off all these zeros and made it to be an integer. So that is something that you see with the different types. A string can be changed to integer to strings and all that. So let's move on then. So let's just look at some common function. So a common function you might want to do with string with integer is to just, for example, say what is the minimum of maybe two integers. So let's just say you had two integers of 70 and 30. You'll be able to get the minimum. So this could have been declared like integer 1, 70, integer 2, 30. So it's the same thing. So you could also get the max. So these are some functions. Remember, functions come before and methods come after, like we saw the string here. So maximum is 70, for example. And then for float, something you could do to a float is that you might have a float like this one, and then you want to round it up, for example. So an interesting function which is commonly used is the round. So round float 1, for example, and then you will get 30, just like here. So the round is almost like you want to get an int of it so that it rounds it, but the difference is that it round up or round down. So if it's 30.5 also, you will go to 31. So this round function is slightly different, but the int function will just wipe out everything from here after the decimal. So just play with them and you should be able to understand how they work and be a bit more comfortable. We are just warming up and building up these building blocks towards being able to combine all this knowledge and be able to do lots of interesting data analysis. So I hope you've learned a lot about numbers now, integers, floats, how to play with them. And as we continue with the other data structures, let's just go on and see how we can get these building blocks together and start building interesting stuffs in subsequent videos. See you next video. Wish you good data luck.